Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project Podcast. In this episode, we're going to explore this movement towards dopamine culture. What is dopamine? How does it affect our brains? And how do we let other companies and people tend to hijack that and distract us from what is actually reality? And what is this life that God has called us into beyond just dopamine? In this episode, Mark and I will explore that and more. Take a listen. Let us know what you think. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Chris.
How are you today?
I'm flying high. How are you?
Flying high.
Yeah, good stuff.
Like a butterfly in the sky?
Whoa, dude, you're a poet.
Yeah.
Nice.
Stole it from Reading Rainbow.
Now I've got that theme song in my head. Thanks.
You're welcome. It's fitting for how many book references I make.
That is true. Is this the book reference for today?
There was no book reference. It was just a reference to book references.
It's more of like a library reference, I
Yeah,
guess. In that
there you
sense.
go.
Yeah.
I tried watching, like Sophia is enjoying TV now. And it's so funny, like the different TV shows that are on now.
Yeah.
There's so many that are just absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
And there's some that are really good, like Bluey, we really enjoy.
Right.
Because it's Australian, so they can still talk about values and things like that without being, But trying to get her to watch some of the old shows that we watched growing up.
Yeah.
And Reading Rainbow is one of those.
Okay.
She cannot do it, even though it's reading through a book. And she loves reading through books.
Yeah.
I think it's just really slow paced.
Right. Well, relatively.
Yeah. Compared to a lot of things now. And we're trying to be really careful about, like, some cartoons are good for imagination, but some of them are literally just dopamine machines.
Yeah.
And they're engineered just to get kids to just keep their eyes glued to the screen.
Right.
So we want a balance of that for imagination, not the dopamine piece, but balance of cartoons for imagination, but also like live action and people being able to see things. And she loves Sesame Street
Yeah.
and all of those. She calls it the Monster Show.
Sweet.
But anyways, the reason why I bring up Reading Rainbow is I think it's a microcosm of what has shifted in culture over the last 20, 25 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
From where you could literally have somebody reading a book on TV and tons of people would watch it. Now that's boring.
Yeah.
Because it's not fast-paced enough. And what got me thinking about this was I read an article from The Honest Broker, and we'll post the link in the show notes. But it's talking about this rise of dopamine culture. So I think a year or two ago, there was a Netflix special that came out about how tech companies are trying to get you just addicted to, like, your phone.
Yeah.
Like social media, etc. And there's a movement starting to happen away from that.
Right.
But where this fits in the grand scheme of things for our podcast is I think it fits really well with the last episode we were talking about of acknowledging reality. And one of our greatest dangers, I think, is getting hooked on this constant need for distraction.
Yeah. The desire to feel good.
Yeah.
By having that hit of dopamine, which is a natural thing that God built our brains and our bodies for. But we're like taking advantage of it, almost hijacking it for purposes that it wasn't intended for.
Yeah. So for people that may not be familiar with dopamine.
Yeah. So when you do something that's pleasurable, like for me, I love to cross things off my to-do list.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Move a Post-it note from one column to the other.
That's right. If I can go, woo, did the thing. It feels good to me. I get that rush of dopamine. That's a chemical in our bodies, hormone. I believe that goes through our bodies and it produces a pleasing effect. We enjoy that. And that, again, that's natural stuff for us to do. It might be, I eat something that's really delicious. Part of what makes that delicious is also this dopamine that's going through our systems. So it's natural. It's part of what God designed. And it gets dangerous when we are taking advantage of it for things that are not what God designed for us.
And every single company is vying for your attention and your distraction for these things. I was talking with a friend of ours who works for a food processing control company.
Okay.
And they do these things to like scientifically engineer what's the perfect crispiness of like a potato chip or the saltiness.
Yeah.
And they have study after studies, millions and millions of dollars poured into these just so it hits the right amount of dopamine for you to continue to eat so that you will eat more of it, buy more of their product.
Well, I forget which of the, was it Pringles or somebody who had once you pop one, you can't stop or something? I mean, that's what they're going for.
I think that's Lay's. Yeah.
Lay's? Okay. Yeah, it was Lay's. It was very effective ad campaign for me, obviously. Anyway.
So many ads that are like, they're a really good ad, but you're like, was it Progressive or State Farm? Or
It was funny.
Yeah.
I don't know what the product was. But I mean, that is what you're talking about. That is, they were being transparent, honestly, about what they're trying to get you to do.
Yeah.
It's hard. Just go ahead and try and eat one M&M. Go ahead.
I don't have any M&Ms.
Yeah, it's almost impossible
I
unless
ate
you're
them
like
all.
exactly. They're gone. There are no more in the world.
Especially peanut M&Ms or peanut butter M&Ms.
Yeah, that's what they want you to do more. They want you to buy more.
Yeah.
They want you to, or in the case of say social media, they want you to view more. They want your eyeballs so they can show you more ads, so they can make more money.
Yeah,
engagement, whatever it might be. They want you there more.
Yeah, and it's easy for us because we tend to want to distract ourselves from reality. Because we can look at the news or social media and go like, oh man, things are hard. And we talked the last episode, like, how do we get ourselves out of that muck and looking at what's actually going on and how do we get ourselves out of the muck and look at what's actually going on and what is God actually doing in our reality?
Yeah.
And so where I want to take this episode is just this higher level awareness around what's happening around us. And in The Honest Broker, he does a really great job talking through how culture has progressed. He talks about how each facet in society started off as art, like this beautiful thing that we were intended to do. Like he'll talk about it with sports, he'll talk about it with film, and like all these great things that were happening. Like you look at them and you're like, wow, that is close to what God designed because there's beauty in there. There's a great storyline. Like you can see victory, you can see teamwork, you can see like all of these virtuous things. And then it started to shift to entertainment.
Yeah.
And entertainment, it was all about what's in it for the person watching, not just the art or the beauty of it in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then that shifted to dopamine hits. So entertainment wasn't enough for us. We didn't just need to sit and watch a 2-hour movie. Now it was, how do we put a cliffhanger at the end of every single 20-minute episode so you'll watch 18 episodes in a row?
Oof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, that hurts.
Yeah. But they know what they're doing. All these manufacturers of things are like, I love sports. I love sports. I am terrible at most sports. And now I have some physical limitations that I can give myself an excuse for not playing sports as much. But I loved playing ultimate frisbee or disc golf. Derek and I have played disc golf a couple times. Won't say who won.
Wow. Sure. Yeah. Just drop that in there.
It was very close. We were very competitive. And it's a lot of fun playing those things. There's this art and being out in nature and just enjoying and like using the body that God gave me, being able to like test out its limits and find out what works and what doesn't and continually build strength. And that's great. I think that's closer to what God designed.
Yeah.
And then I'm also a big football fan. I do not play football. I am not wired or genetically built to play football. I love watching football though. And there's an art and there's a beauty to it. It's shifted now, especially over the last couple of years with football. 90% of the ads, it seems like you will see, are about gambling.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're trying to get is the dopamine hit of gambling. Like there's going beyond just watching the sport to you feel like you're participating and they're getting more of your money.
You got more of a stake in it. So it's more exciting.
I think I saw a stat that like the gambling industry on sports last year was something north of $20 billion, which is, it's absolutely crazy.
Wow.
So it's working. They're tapping into what people want.
Right.
And so when it comes to this culture, I think I want to talk about the danger of falling prey to this.
Yeah. Because this can be a pit to fall down into, to be sure. Yeah, it could be easy to take the stance here of, oh my gosh, I can't believe those companies are doing such nefarious things.
Yeah.
We could talk about that interesting conversation, not where we're going to take it today.
Yeah.
Right. I don't view that as necessarily helpful unless I'm able to influence one of them. So what we can influence are ourselves.
Yeah.
We can recognize
our response and our reaction.
Yeah. What are we doing? What's our reality of this?
Yeah.
Where am I longing for that? And again, I'm not suggesting you have to go be a monk, right? Go be completely sensory deprived. That's not what I would suggest. I mean, if that's what God calls you to do, please do it. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about at this moment.
If you're a monk listening to this, please let us know.
Yes, please let us know. I'd love to talk to you.
Also, how are you listening to this?
Wow. But I do think there's a caution, a danger point in here. If we tie it back into the previous episode of how we are using or seeking these things out instead of reality, is one definite danger. But also just as a general call, if I'm trying to like eat all those M&Ms, or I'm trying to, I'm binging the Netflix show or whatever it is, why?
Yeah.
What's going on in me?
Yeah.
That's pulling me and drawing me toward those things. And this is one of the hardest things to recognize, I think, is when I'll even go as far as to say addiction. Now, there's a clinical definition of that, and that is absolutely true for what I'm about to say, and also the milder versions of it that aren't necessarily clinical. But the whole range of addiction, when we must have that thing.
To be whole.
Yeah. To be whole, to feel almost anything, really. I had a moment last week. It was unusual for me in that I was going through some physical challenges, and so I was very tired. I was teaching a class that was not very rewarding to me personally. And I've just described one of my main dopamine hits is when I cross things off my to-do list. So I was teaching this class that wasn't giving me many dopamine hits. I was so tired afterward that I wasn't crossing anything off my to-do list, which gives me dopamine hits. I'm also on a restricted diet right now, so I'm not eating, like, the M&Ms we just talked about. Nope, that's not on my diet right now. Yeah. So in many of the things that would normally be providing a little bit of that uplift for me, I was without, and I was down. I was very blue and just listless, even aside from the energy. Christine looked at me and said, "I'm worried about you. What's going on?" I just kind of didn't care about things. Oh my gosh. That's a wake up call for me to go, wow. I certainly, God wants me to do things. That's not the question, but am I that reliant on a to-do list? And I'm not trying to be self-condemning. That it could very easily turn into bad me for instead of just a realization moment to have a really good conversation with God and with people who are close to me, like in my case, Christine, to say what's going on here? Yeah. What's God want to teach me in this moment? And it's really hard to have that when we're seeking out that next dopamine hit. Yeah.
I think the way that I'd like to phrase that is don't, you used addiction.
Yeah.
I think what are you being a servant to?
Yeah.
Are you being a servant to your own dopamine? And are you just trying to manipulate that, or what are you supposed to be a servant to?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. If I must go do this thing, I'm playing this game and I have to get the next medal on this game, I'm a servant to the game.
Angry Birds, do people still know that reference? Angry Birds?
It's a little bit of a deep cut, but it's not.
Yeah. I think it's still a thing. Candy Crush.
Candy Crush, sure. Again, those are dopamine generators basically for us, and not necessarily bad, not intrinsically bad. It's when we recognize it crosses a line and we become servants of the thing instead of it serving us. Yeah. That's the danger moment.
Yeah, that's a good way to phrase it. And I think going back to all of these things are there for our enjoyment, and we can find beauty in them. Like sports, we can find the Cinderella story, the storyline of this team. March Madness is coming up. This team that overcame overcoming this giant budget school.
It's the best part of every, because you got what is it, 68 teams now?
Yeah.
And there's bound to be a few Cinderellas in there. And that's one of the best parts of the March Madness.
Yeah. But you can find beauty in things like that.
Yeah.
It's what purpose is this serving, and how am I incorporating this thing into my enjoyment of who God is?
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate purpose. Like just thinking of like an art museum, which is like the opposite of dopamine for me.
For most people, yeah. that's a slow down move.
It's so slow down, but there's beauty there in acknowledging what happened to people and how they poured themselves into this expression of that, and seeing the human need, the human condition coming out through their painting and what they were acknowledging. And I think I don't think it's too far to say we need to slow down.
Yeah.
But we need to pause and acknowledge what is reality and not just distract ourselves and moving from one thing to the next, because before you know it, if you are not designing your life and being intentional about your life, somebody else is. And we can either say, God, I want you to be the designer of my life, or we can fall into default of all of these other companies that are vying for our attention and letting them pull us in whatever direction we do.
Yeah. Wow. That was a punch. Appropriately punched.
Yeah.
There's a test. You could use it as a test, I'll put it that way. That has been a good challenge for me. Kind of a moment of reality for me. I'll just say, I'm going to set the timer on my phone or whatever for 3 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to just say, I just want to spend this time at Jesus' feet. I'm not going to ask him for anything. I'm not trying to tell him anything. I just want to be with Jesus. Oh my gosh, that is so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of that I think is related to this, that can I actually slow myself down and not be asking for the next thing? There's a time for that, but can I just take just a handful of minutes and just be with Jesus?
Yeah.
And just, that's it. Just be in his presence. That's it. And part of the reason it's so challenging because all these sorts of other things come into my brain. Mm-hmm. Remember, I've got to go do for, to me, and that's my to-do list. So I'm like, oh, no, don't forget, I need to go do this. Oh, and I've got to call that person today also.
Yeah.
Those things are coming into my mind because I want to not forget those things I'm worried about. So all those things start to bubble up in that quiet spot. And I can look at those and go, huh, interesting. Yeah. I see that. And I'm choosing not to right now for just a few minutes. It's actually a muscle that I can build to calm that down. And I think that's one practice that has really helped me recognize when I'm hustling for dopamine, basically, when I'm trying to get that hit and go like, whoa, how can I slow this down? And the other great move is just nature. Just get into nature. It's like going to an art museum in that sense. Like nature tends to be pretty slow unless you walk out into a tornado or something. You're going to tend to find it's calming, it's peaceful.
Yeah.
And you can recognize what God has done in that. That is also can produce challenge then as well, where like you can see where your thoughts go, where you want to. Yeah. I wonder what happens next on that episode. Like, okay, this is not the moment for that. I'm going to set that aside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's why so many practices that are really helpful like that, like spending time in nature, spending time just quiet in prayer, spending time in the Word even. Mm-hmm. We've been so programmed and conditioned into the opposite of that slowing down is really difficult for us. And it's so worth it.
It is. This is how hard it is for me. I'm so accomplishment oriented that when I go on a walk, I also struggle with, I wonder how many steps I'm taking, wonder what my heart rate is. Again, not intrinsically bad things, but all of a sudden now I'm turning it into a task.
How do I optimize?
That I can do, right? To gain what is good to gain, but like there's a moment for that and there's moments not for that. And I'm not trying to cross something off my to-do list by taking a walk in nature. I'm trying to calm and be with God. Yeah. That doesn't matter how many steps I take. Yeah. Doesn't matter what my cardio fitness is at that moment in time. That's really not what it's about. Yeah. So it's like so easy to turn it into something. Yeah. That's why I love that practice of just sit at the feet of Jesus. Like, oh gosh, that is so hard. Yeah.
So for all of these things, pull them back to what is reality, acknowledging, God, you're in control of all of this. All of these things are things that you can work in and of and through me. And how are you working in this?
Yeah.
What's the beauty? How is this revealing more of who you are? And just pausing and slowing down.
He has created us to enjoy things.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
This is a very good thing.
Yeah. Not just through the gamification of dopamine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's worth discovering more of how he designed that beautiful part of us as well.
Let's discover life beyond just dopamine.
Yeah.
Not letting dopamine hijack what you're called into, but using it as part of the entire way that God has created nature and life for us to experience.
Yeah. We are not servants to King Dopamine.
Yeah. Instead, you're servants to King Jesus.
Exactly.
There you go. Thanks for exploring that, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Felt good. There's a little dopamine right
Yeah,
now.
I got a dopamine hit out of that. Nice. Awesome. If this episode sounded interesting to you, or you want to explore things related to this, email us at info@humanproject.us. We'd love to hear other topic ideas or questions that you had related to this. And who knows, they might even make it into a future episode. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Our free resources exist because of your generous support. To learn more about us or check out classes that we talk about here, visit us at www.humanproject.us. Thanks for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design.